Okay, let's go into some basic music theory here. Now, the first thing that I want to discuss is what music theory is and is not. Music theory is not a body of restrictive rules which binds your hands and stifles your creativity. Music theory is rather simply a list of observations that the music community has put together over the years of what works and what doesn't, and what kind of relationships exist in music, and how you can use these relationships between pitches to create emotional effects within your music. So music theory is a tool to help you realize the maximum potential of your creativity. Now, some people, I think in learning a musical instrument, sometimes people try to apply music theory concepts that are at the outer limits of their skill level. Then it feels like they're being choked. But the reality is that's not the way you're supposed to use music theory. Music theory is something that you have to have already mastered before you go to apply it to actual performance of music. So you have to stop and think, then you are already behind the beat and it's too late. So you have to know what you're trying to achieve ahead of time. And so music theory is something that you need to learn in the practice time, not during your performance time. If you will learn and utilize music theory during your practice time and master it, then when you go to performance time, then you will already know what you're trying to achieve and how to achieve it. So it will actually greatly enhance your ability to express yourself on the guitar or whatever your instrument of choice is. Okay, so let's start with the fundamental concept of music theory. If we go to the guitar fretboard and make an A note on the 6th string, 5th fret, and we strike that string and then begin to slide our finger up the fretboard while still maintaining the pressure on the fretboard, we'll hear the pitch of the note will increase. And when we get far enough up the fretboard, we'll hear that it sounds like an A again, except that it's a lot higher in pitch. In fact, it's twice the pitch. So what causes that, of course, is the underlying frequency of the vibrations of the strings. We don't need to get too far into that, but if we were to continue to slide, theoretically, in reality, we would leave the guitar fretboard. But if we had a fretboard that would allow us to keep sliding, we would find another something that sounds like an A note. And then we could go on even further and find another A note. These are all octaves of A, and they're based on doubling and tripling the same frequency of vibration of the string. So the octave is our starting point in music theory. Now, this is just a natural phenomenon. This is not something that the musicians got together and made up. It's just something that we found to be in nature. Okay? Now, in Western music theory, now that is not country Western music. When I say Western music theory, I'm talking about the music theory that is rooted basically in Europe and has grown out over to the U.S. and South America and so forth. So in Western music theory, we take octaves and we divide them into 12 equal parts, and we call those parts semitones or half steps. Now on the guitar fretboard, the design of the guitar is such that the frets automatically measure out 1/2 step. So if you change from one fret to another, then you change your pitch by 1/2 step. Okay? Now, the way that we are able to communicate with one another about what pitches we're referring to is we label these pitches with notes with letters of the alphabet. Okay? So on the guitar and on music instruments in general, the standard tuning that we refer to is our reference point for all tuning is 440 hertz. That's an A note. So if you have usually we tune the guitar with an electronic tuner, but you can do it with a tuning fork or a pitch pipe. They're all going to refer to that A note at 440 hertz, and if you have your instrument tuned to 440, that's called concert pitch. Now, there are other tunings besides concert pitch, but if you're going to play with a group of people, you're probably all going to be using concert pitch, unless there's some reason to do otherwise. All right. Now, let's talk about keys. In a simple way, if we take that A note that we talked about earlier, and we consider that span from that A note up to the next A note on the same string, then there will be the original A note and then 11 additional notes, and then it will start over on A again. So we take that original A note and the 11 notes, and that's the key of A, and then we add the next octave to it. That will also be in the key of A. So as long as we're playing such that the tonal base of the music that we're making is on an A note, then we are playing in the key of A. Okay? Now, the way that we achieve emotional effects with the music is through a combination of selecting pitches with certain relationships between them, and then we apply timing techniques, such as we play the notes in a span of time, or we might play some notes at the same time. So we put these things together, and it creates emotional effects in the human mind. Okay? Now, let's take the key of C and start picking apart this code that the community of musicians has found existed in nature, and we just stumbled across it, and we use it to our advantage, and we call that music theory. Okay? Now, the key of C, much like the key of A that we discussed a moment ago, the key of C will include the note of C, obviously, and that's going to be called the root note of the key. And then we'll have the 11 other half steps or semitones, and those all together will make up the key of C. And then, of course, we have multiple octaves of the key of C. All right, so here are the notes in the key of C. Now, these are all what I call the discrete notes in the key of C. There are other possible notes, and the way we can find those notes on the guitar is, of course, by bending the strings. But these are the notes that if you simply mash a fret without bending the string, here are the notes that you're going to come up with if you start on a C note and keep raising in pitch by a half step or semitone. Then you will go through these notes: C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. The next fret will be F. There's no sharps or flats between E and F. You have to remember that. Just memorize that. Then from F, you go to an F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B. When we get to B, same thing as between E and F. No sharps or flats between E and F. Now, the way that I laid this out, we're using all sharps here. You could also, for instance, the C sharp would be the same thing as a D flat. That'd be the same note. Those are called enharmonic equivalents. They're the same note, different label. Okay? So if we start at C and raise by a half step, and we're thinking in terms of the key of C, we're going to call that note a C sharp. If we start at D and we're centered on the key of D, and then we're going to lower that note by a half step, we'll call it a D flat. So that is how you determine what to call a note. It's in reference to the context that you're working with. Okay? All right. So, as we said before, the guitar will automatically measure out a half step change in pitch as you change one fret. So, obviously, 2 frets would be a whole step. Okay? All right. Now, let's look at, we started with the key of C. Now, let's make this into the key of C major. Okay? Now, the key major, the major scale has a specific sound, and it sounds the same no matter what key you're in. And if you've had any kind of musical training, you will recognize the major scale. It sounds like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. If you've ever heard that, that's the major scale. So how do we come up with the major scale? Well, let's look at the key of C, and then look down below in the key of C major. And you'll notice that what I've done here is I just deleted all of the sharp notes, and that leaves us the key of C major. Now, why did that happen? Just because I took out the sharp notes, that made it into a major? No, that's not really the way it works. That's just something that's unique to the key of C. It's the simplest of the scales to understand. The C major scale has no sharps or flats in it, and that's why we picked that one to start with. So let me explain to you how we got to the particular notes that we have in the key of C major. Okay. All right, notice the little letters down below the key of C major, W's and H's. Those stand for whole and half. So those are steps. In other words, we talked about the frets on the guitar measure out a half step change in pitch. Okay, and then 2 frets was going to be a whole step. So if we start at the key, or if we start at a note, of C, and we move a whole step, then we will be on a D note. Then if we move another whole step, that's going to give us an E note. Then a half step to the F, whole step to G, etc. Okay? So this sequence of letters across the bottom here, whole, half, whole, half, that is the scale formula for the major scale. And it will work no matter what root note you start with if you move in a series of steps based on whole, half, whole, half. You will get a scale that has the sound of the major scale. Okay? Now, let's look at another labeling convention that we use in music theory. Okay? And this is called intervals. Okay? So here's how this works. It's just very simple mathematics. The root note of the key that you're in is going to be the first interval. And then the second note will be the second interval. Third note will be the third interval, etc. Then when you get around up to the 7th interval, it starts back over, and you're going to call that the 8th interval. Okay? So we use this system of the letters of the alphabet to identify specific pitches, along with scale formulas to identify the sound of a series of pitches. And then we also use the intervals to be able to transfer concepts about relationships between pitches from one key to another, so that we can utilize those relationships no matter what key that we're in. And that will make a little more sense here in just a minute. Okay, so I've cleaned up the chart a little bit so we can see the key of C major a little more clearly. And I've got of course, the notes in the middle here, and then I have the intervals across the top and the scale formula, the steps across the bottom of the chart. Now, let's clarify the difference between scales and chords. Scales are basically, to play a C major scale, we would play all of these notes one after another. Whereas with a chord, we would pick certain of the notes out of the scale and play them all at the same time. So a C major chord, for instance, is going to be the C, E, and G notes played at the same time. And then if we just play the one note in sequence after another, that's going to be the C major scale. Now there's another kind of thing we can do that's kind of in between scales and chords. It's called an arpeggio, and it's where that you use the chord tones, but you play them instead of one at a time. Instead of playing them together, you would play them in sequence like a scale. That would be an arpeggio. All right. So now let's talk a little more about, let's look at scales in a little more depth here. If you are familiar with music at all, you will be aware of that the major scale is not the only kind of scale that we have. You may have heard of the minor scale. And there's several types of those, but at a basic level, the natural minor scale is the one that you're going to hear most commonly used in popular music. So to make a minor scale, we're going to start with these same notes out of the key of C major, and we're going to alter several of the notes. So we would take the third interval, which would be E, in this case of the C major scale, and we would flat that by a half step. In other words, we go back toward the nut of the guitar by 1 fret from an E note. That will give us an E flat. So we call that a flat third. All right, and then we're also going to make a flat 6th and a flat 7th, and that will give us the sound of a minor scale. And that particular scale is called natural minor. And the other minor scales are not so much as common in the popular music, so you don't really have to know those if you're a hobbyist and just want to learn popular songs. But they're out there if that's something you want to know. The major pentatonic scale is going to consist of the intervals 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 out of the major scale. So if you play those notes in sequence and you're going to skip the 4th and the 7th intervals, that will give you the sound of a major pentatonic scale. And then the minor pentatonic scale, which is very popular in blues and rock, that's going to consist of the 1st, flat 3rd, 4th, 5th, and flat 7th intervals. Okay, now it's important to note that you can play these sequences of intervals out of any scale anywhere on the guitar. It's still going to give you the same kind of feel, the same kind of mood. It's just going to change the key that you're in if you move around. But for the key of C, minor pentatonic, for instance, is going to be 1, which is a C. Then you're going to have a flat 3rd, E flat, 4 and 5, that would be your F and G, and a flat 7 is going to give you a B flat. So if you play those notes in sequence, that'll give you the sound of the minor pentatonic scale. All right, now let's go back and talk a little bit more about chords. Okay, how do you know what notes to pick to make a chord? Well, here's what we found over the years. If you want to have a kind of a very stable sounding and very elevated and bright and happy sounding chord, you can pick the 1st, 3rd, and 5th intervals. Okay, this is called stacking thirds. So we're going to take the 1st, 3rd, and 5th intervals of the key and play them all at the same time, and that would be a C major chord. Now, if we want to create a more somber, melancholy mood, we can simply make an alteration to the 3rd interval, and that will give us a C minor chord, C, E flat, and G. Okay. Now, we call these triads because they have 3 notes. There are 3 notes in the chord. So triad is one of those terms that's from Latin that means 3. It's a 3-note chord. Okay. Now, we can use other, we're not limited to using 3-note chords. There are a wide variety of possible chords, but the major and minor triads are very, very common in popular music. Okay. Now, if you want to spice things up a little bit, you can add the 7th interval. 7th scale degree is another name for that. So then we would have some more possibilities for alterations to create more subtleties of mood. So our major 7th, we're just going to stack another 3rd on top, 1, 3, 5, and 7. If we want a minor sounding 7th chord, then you add the flat 7th to the minor. So you have 1 flat 3, 5, and flat 7. And then for the dominant 7th chord, which is a sound that you hear in blues a lot, you're going to take the major triad 1, 3, and 5, and then you add the flat 7 to it. Okay, so those are your basic common chord types that will cover most of what you're going to find in a lot of popular music. There's certainly some other chord types out there, but if you know and understand these, you can play through a lot of popular songs with just these chords. Okay. All right, now let's talk about chord progressions. A chord progression is a series of chords played one after another, and this is how you write songs. So there are predictable patterns of what types of chords are going to sound good together and trying to create whatever kind of effect. So if you want a song that sounds very stable and very upbeat and happy, you're going to play a major chord progression. So let's look at the chords here in C major, and you'll notice that I've replaced the intervals across the top of the screen. I've replaced those with Roman numerals, and there's a bit of coding in the way those Roman numerals are written to give you a clue as about what kind of chords these are. So if you look at the C in the first position, just the letter C by itself is going to indicate a major triad. So this is going to be a C major with the 3 notes C, E, and G, as we discussed before. And notice the Roman numeral 1 above the C, and it's capitalized, and that indicates that it's a major chord. The capitalization indicates it's a major chord. If you look into the second interval position, you'll see a Roman numeral 2 in lowercase, and that indicates a minor chord. And you'll see that I now have the D labeled with a little M, and that indicates a D minor. Okay, same thing for the E minor in the third position. When we get back to the fourth interval, we're going to find a major chord. It's going to be an F, and then we have a G in the fifth position. When we get back to the sixth position, we're going to find another minor chord. And then in the seventh position, here's a chord we have not looked at yet. This is a diminished triad. It's a first interval note, the flat third, and then the flat fifth. Okay, now this chord is not going to be used a lot in a lot of your popular music, so it's not terribly important to be well acquainted with that chord if you're a hobbyist. But and then from there it goes. It's going to start back over at C major. Okay, so now in terms of chord progressions, okay, what kind of chords are we going to put together to make a song? Okay, here I'm going to give you two very popular chord progressions. They are 1, 4, 1, and 5. So in the key of C major, that would be a C major chord followed by an F. Then you'll go back to the C major, and then you will close out on the G major. And then another common progression that you hear a lot in popular music is 1, 5, 6, 4. And the 6 is going to be minor. Okay, so you can take these progressions here and play through these progressions, and you will hear that the chords make sense together, and everything sounds stable and connected. And you might even be able to hear, if you just happen to play the rhythm that's similar to some other song, you might hear, that you might be able to hear some song that you know and like within these progressions. So this will really help you figure out. A lot of popular songs are based on these progressions, so if you're trying to decipher some kind of song that you want to play, if you know these two progressions right here, it will help you in figuring out a lot of songs. So as you can see, we're going to stop here. Music theory can potentially go a lot farther than this, but if you are a hobbyist and you just want to play some of the popular songs that you enjoy, then what I've covered already is going to carry you a long way. And then whatever you need to know beyond that, then of course you just add that to this base of knowledge that you already have. You don't have to go a great deal farther than this to cover most popular songs that you're going to hear on the radio and so forth. All right. So in terms of the relationships between scales and chords, just very briefly, if you're going to be playing a chord progression that has major chords in it, then you want to use a major scale or a major pentatonic scale to solo over that progression. And then if you want to use, for instance, a dominant a chord progression of dominant chords, dominant sevenths, like it is very common in the blues style, you can use the major pentatonic over that type of chord progression, and you can also use the minor pentatonic over it. So then if you have a minor chord progression, then you're going to use the minor scale to play over that. So if you know these things going in, it can save you a lot of having to decipher things by ear. Not that playing by ear is not a valid playing technique, but it's one technique, and you put that in combination with music theory, and it will greatly expand your creativity and your ability to analyze songs that you love and figure out what they did so you can learn how to play them yourself, okay? So just keep this in mind, and you can, of course, review this video, and there's plenty of resources on the web that will review this information with you. So if you can master this, then you will have gone a long way toward all the music theory that you'll need to play at the hobbyist level, and this will greatly enhance your ability to write songs and pick apart other songs you want to learn. So I hope that's helpful to you.